The ultimate prize of a married man just turned into the ultimate public humiliation. And the entire internet is currently losing its mind. Did the GWIT, the self-proclaimed greatest woman of all time, really just drop $30,000 at the Louis Vuitton store to buy her own relationship validation? Pull up a chair and pour something strong, because the luxury fairy tale between Claressa Shields and Papoose didn't just crack. It completely imploded under the weight of a single, devastating retail receipt. For months, we watched this wild celebrity love triangle play out like a toxic telenovela. Claressa was online non-stop, flexing her relationship, flashing massive rings, and proudly showing off a permanent tattoo of a married man's name under her chest. She acted like she had successfully deleted Remy Ma from the equation. But what if I told you the entire romance was a self-funded performance, and the man she was fighting the world for just packed his bags and quietly flew back to New York without even saying goodbye? Tasha K just dropped a bomb that exposed the absolute darker, financial underbelly of this entire situationship, and the receipts are brutal. We are talking about forced chemistry, manufactured drama, and a world champion boxer allegedly handed a designer duffel bag to a man just so he could gift it back to her on camera. Is Claressa a fearless woman in love? Or is she simply the latest person funding a grand illusion while the real marriage is being repaired behind closed doors? The narrative surrounding the greatest woman of all time just took a catastrophic turn from a dominant sports legacy into a masterclass of public relations desperation and alleged financial manipulation. To truly understand how a multi-time Olympic gold medalist and undisputed world boxing champion found herself trapped in the middle of a messy, multi-layered celebrity love triangle, we have to look at the foundations of this entire public performance. For months, the digital space was absolutely flooded with images, live streams, and highly calculated interviews where Claressa Shields positioned herself not just as a woman in love, but as the ultimate victor in a high-stakes battle for another woman's husband. The man in question is Papoose, a veteran New York rapper whose entire public brand for the last 15 years has been explicitly tied to his fierce, unbreakable loyalty to his wife, rap legend Remy Ma. When Claressa entered the frame, she didn't just quietly date him. She ran a full-scale media campaign. Every single post, caption, and live stream seemed explicitly designed to send a passive-aggressive message to the world, claiming that the legal marriage everyone respected was dead, and she was the new queen on the throne. She was proudly yelling her relationship status from the digital rooftops, constantly referring to him as her man, her future, and her forever, while the entire internet watched with a mixture of confusion and secondhand embarrassment. The public was forced to witness a level of confidence that borderline looked like an unhealthy fixation, as she built an entire fantasy world around a man who was still legally, and apparently emotionally, tied to someone else. The controversy didn't just start yesterday. It has been brewing since she decided to permanently ink his name onto her body, a move that many industry insiders called the ultimate sign of a woman trying too hard to secure a man who refused to secure her. The red flags were waving wildly from the very beginning, but the sheer volume of her online bravado managed to drown out the critics who warned her that playing with a 15-year marriage is a dangerous game. She carried herself with the swagger of someone who had won the ultimate prize, entirely blind to the fact that the internet was treating her situation like a cheap form of reality television entertainment. What makes this entire situation highly controversial and deeply embarrassing is the contrast between her loud declarations and the historical reputation of the man she was defending. Papoose has faced whispers and allegations for years within the entertainment industry regarding his true financial standing and how he maintains his lifestyle, with rumors constantly hinting that his fiercely loyal husband persona was a highly profitable brand rather than a reality. When Claressa stepped into the picture, critics immediately began to wonder if she was being handled, manipulated, or used to revitalize a fading rapper's relevance while his actual household was dealing with its own internal fractures. Past incidents involving various industry insiders have always hinted that behind the scenes of that legendary hip-hop marriage, things were never as perfect as the music videos made them seem. Yet, instead of moving with caution, Claressa dove headfirst into the fire, ignoring the unwritten rules of celebrity dynamics. She went on national platforms, did extensive interviews, and spoke with an aggressive level of certainty, essentially mocking the concept that Remy Ma still had any hold over her husband. The internet watched as she staged courtside appearances, coordinated public outings, and created an illusion of an inescapable, deeply passionate romance that was meant to solidify her status as the definitive replacement. But as any seasoned observer of celebrity culture knows, the louder a relationship is performed on social media, the more fragile it usually is behind closed doors. The sheer repetition of her posts started to look less like genuine affection and more like a desperate need for public validation, as if she needed to convince the world because she couldn't fully convince herself. Every single time Papoose would disappear from her timeline for a few days, a barrage of new, highly defensive photos would drop, accompanied by long paragraphs about loyalty, real love, and ignoring the haters. The behavior patterns were textbook overcompensation, setting the stage for a spectacular downfall, because you cannot outpost a reality that is actively working against you. The turning point that transformed this messy situation into an absolute investigative nightmare occurred when the internet noticed that the math simply wasn't matching. While Claressa was loudly performing her perfect romance online, rumors began to swirl from reliable industry whispers that the marriage she claimed was completely finished was actually being quietly, meticulously repaired in the dark. Papoose was allegedly living a double life, playing the role of the doting, luxury-providing boyfriend in one state while quietly commuting back to his real life, his real family, and his real wife in another. The illusion started to show massive cracks when fans noticed that major holidays were looking strangely lonely for the champion, with her posting old throwbacks or solo shots while claiming everything was perfectly fine. The contrast between her aggressive confidence and the visible absence of the man she claimed to own became too loud to ignore, creating a feeding chain for commentary channels and investigative bloggers who knew that a massive storm was brewing. Then came the moment that completely shattered the foundation of this entire digital empire. Tasha K., a media personality known for pulling the curtains back on the most guarded secrets of the elite, entered the chat and completely flipped the narrative upside down. Tasha didn't just come with opinions. She came with a narrative so detailed and explosive that it instantly turned public sympathy away from the idea of a beautiful romance and directed it toward a dynamic of alleged financial exploitation. Suddenly, the narrative shifted from a story about a woman who successfully won a man to a story about a woman who was allegedly funding her own public deception. The bombshell allegations claimed that the high-end luxury lifestyle, the flashy designer bags, the stacks of cash, and the extravagant romantic surprises that Claressa had been proudly flaunting on her timelines were not the tokens of affection from a wealthy, grateful man. Instead, the devastating claim surfaced that Claressa was entirely self-funding the fantasy from her own hard-earned athletic wealth. According to these explosive reports, the entire operation was a highly coordinated, manufactured performance designed to protect Claressa's public pride and maintain the illusion that she was being treated like a prized queen by a high-rolling partner. The allegations suggest a deeply embarrassing routine where the world champion would go into high-end boutiques, swipe her own black cards, purchase $30,000 bundles of luxury items, and then hand those very bags over to Papoose behind the scenes. The rapper would then allegedly take those exact same self-funded luxury goods, walk into a well-lit room where cameras were rolling, and present them back to Claressa as if he were the big spending, romantic provider she always claimed him to be. This specific revelation sent absolute shockwaves through the digital space, forcing fans and critics alike to immediately go back and rewatch every single old clip, every birthday surprise, and every anniversary video with a completely renewed, highly critical perspective. When you analyze those videos through the lens of these new allegations, the reality looks incredibly dark. The once romantic clips suddenly feel profoundly awkward, the chemistry looks forced, the emotional reactions look heavily rehearsed, and the entire romance feels completely manufactured by a production script. The internet immediately seized on these details, transforming what was once a celebrated love story into a public circus, where the main subject was being accused of paying for her own boyfriend's affection. The public reaction was instantaneous, brutal, and completely unforgiving, as timelines became flooded with memes, deep-dive commentary videos, and relentless mockery of a world-class athlete who supposedly conquered the boxing ring only to get completely played in the arena of love. People started pointing out the tragic irony of a woman spending tens of thousands of dollars to curate a fake reality, just to prove a point to an unbothered ex-wife who hadn't spoken a single word in public. The narrative got even heavier when industry insiders began digging into Papoose's past financial dealings, alleging that this was not his first time utilizing the financial resources of successful women to maintain his public image of wealth and success. Rumors exploded across various platforms claiming that he had allegedly relied on female financial backing for years, mastering the art of recycling gifts, using other people's money to project power, and presenting an illusion of supreme devotion while keeping his own pockets entirely secure. Instead of being viewed as the modern-day romantic hero who swept a champion off her feet, Papoose was suddenly being reframed by the public as a calculated opportunist who found the perfect target in a wealthy, highly emotional, and validation-seeking star. The internet didn't just watch the breakdown of a relationship. They watched the total deconstruction of a persona, as fans began to realize that Claressa was likely never the future wife or the ultimate replacement, but merely the latest financial sponsor of a lifestyle that Papoose could no longer sustain on his own. As the financial allegations continued to mount, the physical and emotional reality of the situation began to collapse simultaneously. While Claressa was online desperately trying to combat the rumors, screaming into live stream cameras, and insisting that her love was real and her man was solid, the actions behind the scenes told a completely different story. Reports began to surface that the communication between the two had completely degraded, with Papoose suddenly becoming unavailable, canceling high-profile plans, and failing to show up for major events where he was fully expected to accompany her. The confidence that defined Claressa's early media run completely vanished, replaced by an aggressive, highly erratic defensive posture on social media, where she began posting cryptic quotes about betrayal, fake friends, and the burdens of being a strong woman. The digital audience, possessing an insatiable appetite for celebrity downfalls, tracked every single change in her digital behavior, noting that the proud, defiant queen of the love triangle was rapidly transforming into a stressed, isolated figure chasing after a man who had already checked out. The final blow to the first phase of this public illusion occurred when concrete reports emerged detailing a sudden, unannounced departure that left Claressa completely stranded in her own manufactured reality. Papoose allegedly packed up his belongings, severed the day-to-day connection, and quietly caught a flight back to New York City without offering any public explanation, any closure, or any defense for the woman who had ruined her reputation trying to protect him. He didn't just leave a relationship. He left an entire narrative behind, completely vanishing from her world, and refusing to answer the very phone calls that were meant to coordinate their next public performance. Social media turned absolutely feral as the news of this silent departure spread, with users realizing that while Claressa was sitting in luxury stores alone racking up astronomical bills to comfort her bruised ego, the man she was funding was already miles away, stepping back into the exact life, the exact marriage, and the exact house he had never truly abandoned. This sudden disappearance left an enormous vacuum that was immediately filled by the brutal reality of digital exposure. The internet ceased treating the situation as a light-hearted piece of celebrity gossip and began analyzing it as a case of severe public abandonment and identity theft. Fans and commentators began to realize that the ultimate tragedy of this situation wasn't just the loss of a relationship, but the complete and utter destruction of an identity that Claressa had built entirely around being the woman who won. With the rapper completely gone from her side, the thousands of defensive tweets, the permanent chest tattoo, and the expensive self-funded gifts suddenly transformed from symbols of victory into permanent monuments of public humiliation, paving the way for the terrifyingly detailed similarities that would next be brought to the light of day. The dynamic of imitation and strategic positioning shifted into an entirely different gear once social media investigators began dissecting the profound structural similarities between Claressa Shields and Remy Ma. This wasn't just a simple case of a new girlfriend adopting her partner's tastes. Internet detectives began unearthing a pattern of behavior that borders on total identity absorption. Timelines across every digital platform became heavily saturated with brutal side-by-side breakdowns, showing that Claressa had allegedly been systematically replicating Remy Ma's exact lifestyle blueprint. Critics pointed to the identical high-end jewelry configurations, the specific calculated angles in front of identical sports cars, the precise replication of hairstyles, and even the eerie mimicry of textual phrasing used in her social media captions. The online commentary turned deeply sarcastic, with millions of viewers concluding that Claressa wasn't just attempting to navigate a relationship with a rapper. She was actively trying to morph into the woman who had defined his life for the last 15 years. The public reaction to these side-by-side exposures shifted the narrative from a standard messy affair into a highly scrutinized psychological breakdown. The permanent tattoo of Papoose's name, which Claressa had proudly unveiled to the world as the ultimate testament of her fearless love, suddenly became the heaviest asset dragging her public brand into the mud. The internet took the opportunity to highlight a devastating contrast that Claressa completely overlooked. Papoose had spent decades carrying Remy Ma's name permanently etched into his skin, a symbol of a deep, time-tested marital foundation that weathered prison sentences and industry shifts. Claressa's decision to get his name inked beneath her chest looked less like a romantic milestone, and more like a desperate, permanent attempt to force an anchor into a ship that was already sailing away. Social media users mocked her relentlessly, pointing out that no matter how many tattoos a woman gets, she cannot legally or emotionally force a man to stay when his legal documents, his history, and his real loyalty are still firmly registered in New York. While Claressa was caught in this aggressive vortex of public imitation and defensive live streaming, the grandmaster strategy of Remy Ma was playing out with clinical precision. Throughout the entire multi-month digital circus, while her name was being dragged through every toxic comment section, and her marriage was being analyzed by millions of amateur relationship experts, Remy Ma maintained an absolute, devastating wall of silence. She did not release frantic public statements. She did not engage in low-level Twitter back-and-forths, and she completely refused to grant interviews to acknowledge the younger world champion, who claimed to have successfully pushed her out of the picture. Instead, Remy played a silent, high-stakes game of pure action over words. Whenever she did step out into the public eye, she made sure she was wearing her original wedding bands, looking completely unbothered, glamorous, and fully secure in her power. Behind the scenes, completely hidden from the screaming cameras of internet commentary channels, reliable insiders reported that Remy was quietly, meticulously re-knitting the fabric of her household. She focused heavily on private family dynamics, intimate dinners, holiday traditions, and maintaining a solid, peaceful environment that served as a stark contrast to the hyper-staged, expensive, and stressful digital production Papoose was experiencing down south. The contrast between the two women was absolutely stark. One was constantly screaming for validation on live cameras while allegedly financing her own relationship props, while the other sat in absolute silence, retaining her dignity, her marriage, and total strategic control over the board. The inevitable climax of this quiet chess game played out exactly as veteran celebrity observers predicted. Family photos quietly began to leak onto the internet, not from messy gossip accounts, but from legitimate family members showcasing intimate New York holiday gatherings where Papoose was fully integrated back into his original household. The matching marital rings returned to his hands, the smiles looked unforced, and the atmosphere was entirely devoid of the awkward, scripted chemistry that had defined his recent videos with the boxing champion. The reality became completely impossible for the internet to ignore. Papoose had packed up and gone back to his wife, returning permanently to the family life he had never fully abandoned in the first place. He had treated his time away as a temporary distraction, a self-funded vacation from his real life, and when the vacation ran out of budget, he simply went home, leaving his host to deal with the astronomical financial and emotional fallout. The public consequences for Claressa Shields instantly shifted from standard internet trolling into a deeply concerning observation of a public unraveling. As the imagery of Papoose and Remy's silent family reunion dominated the digital space, Claressa reportedly began to display a pattern of highly erratic behavior online. She spent hours executing highly emotional live streams, typing out massive, paragraph-length defensive captions on her photos, and offering completely unprovoked reassurances to her remaining audience that she was still happy, still winning, and completely unbothered by what the bloggers were saying. But the physical evidence of her sudden isolation was far too loud to ignore. The The courtside basketball seats that used to feature two people posing for the paparazzi were now occupied by her alone, looking visibly distressed while trying to force a smile for the flashing cameras.